Hello, everybody. I'm Susan Howard, a Brookline criminal defense attorney with a national practice, and welcome to Brookline Interactive Group's cable television show, The Safety Net, dedicated to educating all of us and having a conversation on domestic violence and various related topics. And today, even though this show was planned over a month ago, we had no idea that it would be so timely, given the news yesterday of the national sex trafficking cases going on here in Massachusetts, Dedham, Watertown, Cambridge, high end, and also in the suburbs of DC. And with us is somebody very, very involved as a volunteer, as a concerned citizen. And basically, I consider her my expert in this area, Janika LeMaitre. Janika, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be on the show with you, Susan. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Janika is president of the Women's Business Group Connecting Non-Profit Women for Business in Networking in Greater Boston. She's a member of the Protocol Diplomatic Group, and she's an officer in association. She volunteers for RIA. We will get to RIA immediately. She's on the board of directors for the Western Whaling Rotary Club, board advisor for the Boston Lyric Opera. I could go on and on and on. She's certified by the Protocol School of Washington and the Institute of Leadership Management. She's a mom, she's a wife, she's a professional woman. She does it all. And thank you for being here. Janika, I'm going to jump right in, even though we discussed other topics. What is your take on the news of yesterday of this national sex trafficking arrangement that two of the I guess founders or leaders are right here from Boston?
It's jarring. I will say I was shocked that it's actually been televised nationally, because a lot of these types of sex trafficking rings are actually swept under the rug, and you really don't hear a lot about this on the news. So to hear and to see it really out there in the media now, I feel like in a way this is, I hate to say it, it's great to keep the conversation going and make sure it's at the forefront of people's minds that it is something that happens around the corner from you in your neighborhood. And this is a case in point. It really is.
Oh my gosh, you are so right. What is glamorized sex, and what is the connection to trafficking?
So here's something that I've learned, and I consider myself an ally with an organization called Ready, Inspire, Act. And I'll
RIA.
RIA, exactly. And I'll get to what they do and the services they provide a little later. But what I've learned from working with this organization, and they're a nonprofit based out of Framingham, is that commercial sex is different to sex trafficking. And so commercial sex, and I have a definition here, it means any form of commercial sexual activity, such as sexually explicit performances, prostitution, participation in the production of pornography, performance in a strip club, exotic dancing or display, and something in exchange for money or exchange for something else. And so when we look at what commercial sex is, some people do it out of their own free will, and that is up to them. That is their choice. And the glamorization of this industry has been brought forward through social media, through music videos, movies, making it a really again glamorous type of sort of lucrative industry to be in. However, about 85 to 90% of people who are in the commercial sex industry are actually trafficked.
What does that mean, Janika? What does that mean, trafficked?
So
they're transported?
They're trafficked. So basically, when you hear the term pimp, it equals the same as being a trafficker. So someone who controls a person, their body, their mind, their spirit, everything, in exchange for monetary purposes. And so when we think about sex trafficking, which is part of the commercial sex industry, And it's not to be confused. They're two very different terms. Sex trafficking is really what is happening in the commercial sex industry. And a lot of people don't realize that the two cross over. So I do have some statistics coming up later, and we can go into that a little more, but I just wanted to break it down so it was really easy to understand the difference between the two. So
Okay.
it's someone being exploited, their body against their will, and a lot of them are actually underage, a lot of people that are being...
That's what's really coming to the forefront, the underage aspect of this. We're talking to Janika LeMaitre, who is a volunteer, ally, friend, supporter of RIA, Ready, Inspire, Act. And what are the most vulnerable populations? Are they the underage? Are they homeless? Because I've heard about trafficking in Melina Cass. And trafficking from the Ukraine to Poland when that first started. It's probably still going on because I was contacted by some people. What is the most vulnerable population for the trafficking?
Well, first and foremost, they're women and children. And the average age of someone being trafficked in the United States, and I'm not talking about everywhere else around the world because there are so many different statistics out there, but the average age is between 13 and 15.
13 and 15.
15.
Janika, are these runaways? Are they runaways?
A lot of them are vulnerable from the sort of child welfare and juvenile justice system, foster care system, they experience homelessness, their youth that are transitioning between families or residences. Some are foreign. They're coming here for asylum. They're not with their parents, so they're a target. And that makes them very vulnerable. So I think that when you look at who is someone that can't protect themselves very well, and that is someone that doesn't have a parent or a guardian that's close by that is really watching their best interest.
So why is it so difficult to get accurate statistics? Because nobody keeps them, Janika?
Oh, this is actually a really good question, because as I was just on a gala committee to help fundraise for the services that RIA provides for survivors. And so our goal was to set up an immersion exhibit where people would walk through and understand from beginning to end what happens to someone as they enter the sex trafficking industry. How are they groomed? Just one of the ways that's possible. And then some of the statistics around that. So over the past 8 months, the committee and we spent a long time combing through this research. But a lot of it is tricky because when you think about what trafficking is, it's actually a big umbrella for two different categories. There's labor and human trafficking, as well as sex human trafficking. And so
wait, what do you mean labor? And you mean people being exploited to come and work for nothing?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
They'll take their passport away. They'll take away however it is that they can get out, and they control how they stay working for them. So it's labor trafficking.
It's labor. And sex trafficking is basically the same techniques, but the end product is different. Am I correct? It's for sexual exploits. And if they don't do what they're supposed to do, they could be threatened, say, with deportation, or they're going to take away their money. And drugs are involved. Am I right, Janika? Because I do this in my practice.
Yeah, drugs are heavily involved from my understanding. And so to make sure that they're really tired, that they can't have full control of their body, drugs is one of the ways to keep someone that is
interesting.
Exploited and trafficked, to keep them within the trafficker's control. And it's really, it's quite shocking when you start to hear the survivor stories and what they've been through, and why when they try to exit, it's very difficult. So
why is it so hard for prostituted people to get out? because of the control of those and who controls them?
So some of the research that we did come across is 90% of traffickers are men, but then you have these different categories within how someone gets into being prostituted. And so the grooming process, a lot of people don't understand that when you're around someone who's young and vulnerable, they are looking for someone to support them. Sometimes they're looking for love. Sometimes they're looking for a figure that's going to be someone that they rely on and respect and feel like they're going to have their best interests at heart for them. And so when you're someone very young, a child, and you feel like you have found that person, then you will trust them with anything. And that's when the mental abuse starts. So, you know, the love that they think they're getting might be taken away. They're addicted to drugs, so they're physically incapable. And there's this vicious cycle. So in Massachusetts right now, which is, you know, we'll talk about the Emma Coalition and the act that's just been passed through as a bill. What's happening right now is when someone who is being prostituted, and it could be someone who's trafficked, it could be someone who's not, if they're arrested, then it goes on their record, they're put in jail, they're incarcerated. And then what happens is when bail, when they're up for bail, their trafficker will come and bail them out. And they're put straight back into the same system of trafficking that they were just in. And sometimes also it's because they're not even in the same country.
Right.
So they're moved overseas. And if you think about this very recent example of the ring that was happening between Virginia and Massachusetts, they're traveling interstate. So they may not have ID. They may not have anyone that they know in the area. And so when they're trying to escape, they might not have anything with them. So something interesting is two of the survivors that we spoke with indirectly through RIA for our immersion exhibit, we actually asked them, could you tell us on the day that you could pinpoint that you felt like you were able to fully exit, and on average it's about 7 times to try to get out, what you physically have with you? Because we want to paint a picture for the people who are walking through the immersion exhibit. And so one of the survivors let us know that they had a garbage bag, and inside the garbage bag was a blanket and a little stuffed toy, and they had a car seat, but they didn't have much else. They had maybe they didn't graduate high school, they had a criminal record, they had maybe there were cigarettes and a couple of nips of alcohol. And so you can see clearly there's not much, and that's just
there's nothing, Janika. There's nothing.
And where
no money, no cell phone, no identification. So they're totally isolated by the trafficker, am I correct? From everything they've known, family, community, friends, whatever. And they're out there, and so they become really, really, really dependent on the trafficker. Oh my gosh. So how do people get out? How do they get out?
With organizations like RIA, and we can talk about their services in a little bit, but in Massachusetts, there aren't many organizations like RIA. Around the United States, there are some really interesting ones like Thistle Farm. But the fact is, to be able to feel confident enough, be assisted by an organization like RIA. Some of the survivors just are afraid to talk, or they're still addicted to drugs, or there's something. And so there are some services that RIA offers, like going into, let me just make sure I'm saying this correctly, peer mentorship and advocacy. So they connect with survivors to help them with their healing and their journey.
But how do they find them, Janika? If I wanted to help, I mean, I'm an attorney, so they come to me, and I've defended a lot of those accused of prostitution in Massachusetts and across the nation. So I know the system. But if somebody wants help, how they can't really reach out on their own. The organizations have to have I'm going to say intelligence to get in, reach them, and get them out clandestinely. Am I correct?
Right. Sometimes it takes a long time to separate oneself, from my understanding, from a trafficker. And so so a lot of the times that RIA has a great relationship with one of the prisons in Massachusetts, and they actually go in and they speak to survivors that are currently serving time. And so that's just one of the ways they might find people.
That's great. That's great. Do they go into like DYS? Do they have any connections with Division of Youth Services, with I want to say Boy Scouts, with other groups that are targeted to young people, healthy groups, so that these young people are on alert, that if a stranger makes them a promise that you're going to go see Taylor Swift and sit in the front row, don't believe it?
Right. That's a really good question. I cannot speak to that, but I'm sure there is some type of relationship with a youth service organization, because RIA is one of the very few organizations that has survivor-led exit programming.
Survivor-led, meaning they hire survivors to help other survivors get out, get established, get on their feet, and maybe reclaim a life, if not their old life.
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
And what is the legislation in Massachusetts? H1597. You testified on behalf of that legislation, didn't you?
No, I actually didn't. I actually happened to be there as they were speaking and trying to bring more light to it, because it's sort of been dormant for a little while. And it's Sex Trade Survivors Act, and it's based on this what is known as the Nordic model in Europe, and the first country to pass this model, and it's now known as the equality model, which is I think it's really going to be effective in helping create some change here. But it's got a few objectives, and so the first is to decriminalize prostituted people, and you can hear verbiage there. It's not prostitutes, it's prostituted people.
Right.
Hold traffickers accountable, exploiters, brothel and illicit massage parlor owners, hold everyone accountable there. Fund and ensure continuation of programs that provide access to viable options and protections for prostituted people. Penalize the purchase of sex, prohibiting the purchase is most effective. It's one of the most effective measures states can do to eliminate trafficking and prostitution. And finally, provide education, prevention, public awareness, and demand reduction efforts. I think that's really important, because the more people are talking about it, the more awareness there is, and people have an understanding of even just the vocabulary and sort of the words that are used around this industry. I learned a lot myself this year, and I feel like I am much more aware. I can speak more intelligently to what is happening, and sort of acknowledge that there is an issue, and what next? How does Massachusetts handle this? Because over the past 30 years, it's just multiplied. It's sort of exploded statistically. And so when you look at the illicit markets and sort of what the demand, because there's definitely a lot of demand here, the illicit market is made up of guns, drugs, sex trafficking. And so drugs, it's makes up about 31% of the market, guns 30%, and then sex trafficking 39%. It is much more of a real issue for and much more interesting for criminal markets to sort of set up shop in Massachusetts. And
You
so,
know, Janika, when I first started practicing law, I was assigned to the session in the Boston court that dealt with prostitutes.
yeah.
And at that time, it's definitely a commercial case. You have to see the exchange of money. And many times, my clients, the prostitutes, they didn't see the money, but they were arrested and they were sent to prison. And we only have one. In those days, there were no like county jails that took women. Now there are a few, so they would have to go to Framingham. And then they'd get out and they'd be standing there. And who would pick them up? The traffickers, the pimps. They would be waiting for them and they'd go right back into the same old, same old. And the pimps would come to court and they would sit there and stare these defendants down. And if they were released, they would escort, the police saw this. They would escort them right out of court, right back into the same thing. So I know exactly what you're talking about. But first of all, tell us what RIA does, because RIA is very unusual.
Yeah, RIA's, I think it's a really fantastic organization because they provide services, like I said before, peer mentorship and advocacy so that they connect with others that have had similar experiences to themselves. And not everyone's a survivor there. They work with allies as well. And those are people who support the organization like myself.
Like you.
Yeah, but everything's very confidential. So I actually do not interact with survivors myself. I'm on the other end of it where I help them connect with people that they might need connecting with, such as yourself, Sue. And so like case management and making sure that they have support when they do attend a court hearing. They provide outreach and training. So they offer workshops and presentations to help their organization or your own organization that you might be affiliated with, and the risk of how human trafficking, or like what the impact is on their community, and how people themselves in the community can get involved, and what with their own level of comfort. They offer clinical care as well as financial assistance. They have something called a She Fund, so that helps. It's sort of an immediate, someone needs help with rent, so that month, so that's an immediate fund that here you are, here's this month's rent. But they really try to help them get their footing and get into the real world again, should I say, and on their own 2 feet.
Do they find them housing? Do they find them jobs, or do they assist? Let me rephrase that.
They assist. So
they assist in finding housing and finding jobs. And what if they can't find housing for someone? Is there a place? Do they go into a shelter, which I think would be very dangerous?
Shelters are very dangerous. There's a lot of aggression. It's not as safe as one might think, and so
exactly.
Yeah, I think the violence is just as real in a shelter than it is.
Right. I know some of my clients prefer staying on the street as opposed to going to a shelter. Janika, you don't have to answer this question because we didn't talk about it, but how did you get involved in this?
So the director of development and strategy, I've known her for about 15, 16 years now.
That's how.
And so she started the conversation, and the more I listened, the more I learned. I thought, to me, I feel like there are a lot of organizations out there that are nonprofit charities that are raising money and awareness for really great causes. But this was one that I haven't heard a lot about. And after doing a lot of traveling internationally myself for work, I have seen a lot of eye-opening things that I didn't realize what I was looking at the time in many countries around the world. So it's just, if there is something that I felt like if there was something that I could do to help to educate myself, and then again provide resources or connect this organization to anyone else, to me, that is worth something. That is worth my time and energy.
My goodness. We're running out of time in the last minute or two. What would you like the audience to know and do?
please take a look at the Emma Coalition. And the Emma Coalition is, it's basically, they want to introduce the equality model in Massachusetts, which has already been established in quite a few countries around the world, such as, I will tell you, we've got France, Sweden was the first, Northern Ireland, Norway,
Wow.
Canada. These countries have already introduced a law that mirrors one another, and they're seeing a great reduction in people purchasing sex. And so the markets are not as attractive for criminal.
Oh, terrific. Would have helped with this big case that just came to our attention yesterday.
And
If people want to get in touch with you, should they do it through RIA?
I would say they could, but I would say go straight to the equalitymodelma.org. This is
equalitymodelma.org. Okay.
Yeah, go sign up, join the campaign if you can, become a little educated yourself and sort of learn what is actually happening in Massachusetts. Maine was the first to pass this bill into a law, and Massachusetts was hoping to be the first, but we're hoping to be the second. But we need support. I think the Emma Coalition needs support, and so the more awareness, the better. Please go and sign up and learn more.
Well, I certainly will do that. In all of my years of doing this kind of work, I didn't know about the equality model. Janika LeMaitre, you must come back. Given the news, we have to follow this, and we're going to rely on you. And I thank you so much for sharing your experience, your wisdom, and your efforts to be an ally. It's not easy work. I know that. It's got to be really heartbreaking, even though you don't interact with the psoriasis directly. You do indirectly. So Janika LeMaitre, thank you so very much for being on the Safety Net. Bye.
Glad to be of service. Thank you.